Hey everyone, it's Matt Schlapp with another episode of America UnCanceled. I haven't been sitting in this chair very often because my beautiful wife and talented wife, Mercedes, has been doing so many of the interviews, but she's off at Newsmax, and I get the privilege of talking to one of our very favorite people on God's green earth and one of our board members, Bill Walton. Bill, how are things out there in the mountains?
They're great. I feel responsible for doing a good job. I'm sitting in the seat you usually sit in when you do your guest gigs from here.
Yeah, no,
It's beautiful.
it's an important seat, and the view out there is great, and you live amongst real people. And one of the things I've noticed ever since society made it very clear that it was crumbling in so many different ways, kind of civil society has been under attack, and good people are having high blood pressure problems and worried and concerned about their country. One of the things I do when I drive around in my car is I've navigated from listening to a lot of political talk to listening to a lot of business talk, because I'm hoping to find some certainty, Bill. I'm tired of talking politics with people that don't know what they're talking about and trying to push things that I know are wrong and trying to figure out, okay, what's going on with our economy? And the one theme I pick up when I listen to, I guess, mostly CNBC, because that's what's on satellite radio, is this idea that the American people should be really happy because the economy, we've kind of got this soft landing. The whole Biden policies have worked out pretty well. Unemployment is low. So it's kind of like, what are you guys so worried about? Why are they saying that?
Well, simply put, there are a couple of economies, Matt. There's the globalist elite stock market economy, and the seven magnificent tech companies, which are trading at all-time highs, or most of them are. And so the wealthy have gotten a lot wealthier in the last 3 years with Biden. Some estimates their net worth has gone up 3 to 4 times in this period, while the rest of the country, the middle class and people who live from paycheck to paycheck, have seen almost no wealth increase. And in fact, it's probably declined when you look at the affordability of housing. And these numbers you get about unemployment, it's crazy. Nobody pays attention to these statistics because they're not real. They say unemployment now is 3.7, 3.8%. We're supposed to argue over whether Biden's done a good job creating jobs. Well, he's done a great job creating jobs if you want to work in the government. Yeah. Or if you want to work in the healthcare industry, which is essentially a piece of government now. But the numbers are masked by the fact that Biden took a lot of people out of the workforce in 2020, 2021 with all the pandemic relief, and 6, 7, or 8, or 9 million of them haven't chosen to come back to work. And if you factor those back in, unemployment looks more like 7 or 8%. So it's just another lie coming out of the government statistical machine.
Yeah, I think we all know that you can go around, drive around almost any city, and you can see help wanted signs. It's not a question of can you get a job, it's a question of what is that job. And they used to call them MIC jobs. Remember that? There were these service industry jobs, and you've sent Mercy and I on several occasions analyses of who are getting these jobs. A lot of the people who are getting these jobs that Joe Biden brags about are people who are just getting here, the so-called new arrivals, not necessarily the Americans who are struggling and been here a long time and they're not seeing their wages go up.
Well, the governor of Maine has just set up an office. I think it actually is the Office of New Arrivals. And what they're doing is they're taking illegal aliens or undocumented workers, or whatever the label is for people now, and they're giving them all the training and all the documents they need to find work in the economy, whereas regular Americans who've been here all along are not afforded that same treatment. But let's step back a bit. From day one, the Biden administration, not just Joe Biden, but everybody, all his cabinet secretaries, have not been aimed at economic growth and have not been aimed at the well-being of the middle class. Their agenda, and its whole of government, every single agency, has been aimed at the climate change agenda and at the equity agenda, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And by any measure, the climate agenda is not economic. It doesn't create jobs unless they're subsidized by trillions of dollars of taxpayer money. And diversity, equity, inclusion, that sounds fine, but what we're doing is we're taking that basic American wonderful principle of meritocracy, and we're saying it doesn't matter how much merit you have, it only depends on what your identity is. And ordinary people feel that day in and day out. And You talk to people out here in Rappahannock County, Virginia, and that's pretty much what they'll start with. Well, the government may be doing something for some folks, but not us.
Well, part of DEI, you talk about this ideology of pushing these false ideas seems to trump everything. But one of the problems with DEI we're seeing is, you got to get engineering right, Bill, or planes fall out of the sky and doors fall off planes. And we know there's been this push by the federal government and state governments and banks and financial institutions to push this DEI agenda. Eventually, if you're not always hiring the most qualified employee for every role, especially engineers, there's an adverse side to that, which is you have the second string in, and you're going to have accidents. And we're going to see this riddled throughout not just our economy, but any economy that grabs a hold of this. But I only see this is a uniquely American thing with this kind of like racial animosity that we're building and putting into policy.
Well, it is racial animosity, and it's infecting every single government agency as well as our big companies. Take something that's really mission critical. This is not new news, but a couple of months ago, the FAA website released the fact that they're recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and mental and other physical conditions under their diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. And, the FAA used to have a very rigorous test that people had to take about mathematical reasoning, spatial recognition, all the sort of skills you want if you've got somebody at a computer screen trying to keep our planes up in the sky. Well, they've thrown that out, and they've said it included identity as their key hiring metric. Now, I might add, this infects large corporations too. Boeing really launched pretty much the same initiative 4, 5, 6 years ago, and there are a couple of essays written by former Boeing engineers that they were replaced, or people they reported to were replaced, people not with highly technical engineering backgrounds, but those who fit the identity metric. And so maybe, I'm not saying it's exactly causation, but there does seem to be correlation between those hiring practices and doors falling off of airplanes. And every week you read about another Boeing plane that's had a landing gear failure, et cetera, et cetera. So these kind of policies do work their way into our lives, and I think soon to be perhaps tragic consequences.
Well, yeah, I mean, once planes start falling from the sky, you got a big problem. I mean, when our major manufacturer might want to reconsider its name from Boeing to Boing, or as I said to Mercy the other day, I have a whole new meaning for I have to catch my flight, because you're right. Once you have a tragic malfunction in the air, the consequences are dire. And this is true. This is true with cars where they have crazy ideas. This is true in the military where they have crazy ideas. And nothing infects the brain more than this climate change. This is a real virus. This is like.
Well, I said it infected our entire cabinet. Every single cabinet of Biden's government is infected with this. Jennifer Granholm, the Secretary of Energy, is now pushing for the fact that she believes the entire U.S. military ought to be using electric vehicles, EVs, by 2030. Well, that's only 6 years from now, and I'm visualizing those electric tanks somewhere in the fields of Ukraine, and they're looking for a plug or for a station to refuel their military equipment. I mean, the fantastical. Talking about mathematical, just the unrealistic assumptions behind their objectives are really staggering.
Yeah, so I think about this, which I do think human beings have an impact on their environment, and they have an impact on every other human being. Now, whether or not human beings collectively can have an impact on the temperature is a really interesting philosophical conversation to have based on a lot of science. But take all of that and put it to the side and ask yourself this question, which is, if the fact that human beings are on the earth might have some impact on what the temperatures are, can those human beings working collectively have any impact on changing that dynamic? And this is the insanity of all of their proposals. If you look at what even they admit their impact is, I don't think you could register it as negligible. the change they think these things would make. But in the meantime, there's catastrophic economic consequences, health consequences. You talk about the military putting freedom at risk, all for the idea that you have a bumper sticker you can put on the tank that, hey, I'm traveling light because I'm an e-tank. This is, you get into a little bit of mental derangement here, Bill. This isn't just, it's dangerous, it's wrong, it's unscientific, but it's really dangerous. Why are smart people risking humanity with these stupid ideas?
Well, there are two things. One, it's a religious principle for a lot of people. When you take God out of the equation, people need faith, and they found faith in the climate movement. But the climate movement's part of a larger radical agenda of the left, which is, I think, profoundly anti-human. And the Exhibit A is Greta Thunberg, who started out telling us how evil we were because we were burning fossil fuels. Now she's marching in a parade in support of Hamas and Gaza, and she's turned totally against Israel. Now, why do we think she would be interested in both those causes? Because all those causes tend to get lumped together in the mind of these leftists. And then the other factor is just pure and simple greed. The trillions of dollars that are being poured into climate subsidies, that all, I might add, go mainly to Democrat donors and fellow travelers of the Democrat Party. I mean, John Podesta runs a $400 billion venture fund set up through the Inflation Protection Act, or was it Inflation Reduction Act? I lose track of the names. Anyway, it's anything but. It's a green agenda, and if you look at where those dollars are going to, the first $20 billion he handed out were to, surprise, surprise, major donors to Joe Biden. So this is a money machine in addition to a religious movement, and those two things taken together are something we're going to have to develop the power to learn to resist.
We used to call those earmarks back when Republicans ran Congress, and we're so damn noble that we got rid of our ability to do earmarks, which I think for understandable reasons, but essentially we've turned over that power to give honeypots of money to our friends, to Joe Biden and his ilk, and with very little confrontation from Congress over those questions.
Well, and I might add, there are a lot of Republican beneficiaries of this largesse. I mean,
yeah,
if you
good
look
point.
at the districts that the climate money is going to, it's pretty bipartisan. And so what they're doing is what they did with ethanol, is they're building in a constituency that's getting money from this bad science, and they want to embed it in our budget and our body politic. And once you get something like that in there, it's very hard to remove.
Well, I think Greta Thunberg, or whatever her name is, I think she's probably doing very well with her portfolio. Probably not from her investments, but probably from the large amounts of grants and checks she gets from all these people that think that she's doing good in the world. So in this moment of insanity, you've been the CEO of a publicly traded company. You've run a lot of different businesses. You're a sophisticated consumer of business information. Go back to the beginning of this conversation. We're being told inflation's mostly in check, although it popped up again. We're being
not in check.
We're being told that unemployment is at half a century lows, even though it popped up a little bit recently. We're being told things are good. Why is that completely wrong?
Well, the reason it's completely wrong is just go into to a grocery store and start buying groceries, and you'll find that even though you may have gotten a pay raise, wages have risen a lot less rapidly than food prices have, and so just your day-to-day life of what you spend money on, you've been hit to the tune of, by some estimates, $1,500, $2,000 a year in your wealth. And so that's a statistic that isn't a government statistic. It's your personal check, your pocketbook. And then look at the job opportunities, look at the hiring opportunities, and look at how identity politics has dramatically changed the market for jobs. And so economics is not just about the dollars that flow your direction. It's also about your sense of opportunity, of prospects. And the Biden administration has amped up the federal regulatory regime so that it really enters into every single corner of our life. Consumer Product Safety Commission now wants to ban gas stoves. So it's not just the money you have, but it's what you can spend money on. And what do you think your prospects are for a job, or what are your children's prospects for an education when the affirmative programs in the college entrances mean that your kid might come in last if he's not part of the right identity group? So that's all part of your economic outlook, and I think it's why people are feeling so lousy, no matter what the headline number might be on jobs or inflation.
For Mercy and I, we realized this probably at the beginning of this insanity was the beginning of Black Lives Matter insanity, and we used to call it Black Lives Matter Homeowners Association because we were like, where's all this money going to go to? Well, sure enough, it seemed to buy a lot of multi-million-dollar homes for the people who were supposedly running it and all their family members and everything else. It was always kind of a sham, a shakedown, even though I think a lot of good people thought that it was for noble causes. It didn't turn out to be. So you look at these things that kind of overtake us, and it seemed like all the bigs, the big institutions, the big churches, the big schools, the big companies, all went headlong into this idea that America's a racist, systemically racist country, and we got to change everything about America in order to come up to this better place. And in the meantime, a lot of millions of freedom-loving Americans realized, hey, I don't get to check enough boxes to get any promotions or to get that entry-level job or to get into that premier medical school or whatever else. Let me ask you this question, because you've done a lot of entrepreneurial things. In a crazy, perverse way, has that created a new phalanx of entrepreneurs out there who aren't going to go through the big institutions to be successful? They're going to find new ways to be successful? Or is it the opposite? We've taken a lot of millions of young, talented people and just kind of stunted their ability to make a living, to put money aside, to be an investor, and we'll never get it back. What's your take?
I think my think is there's still plenty of opportunity, and we talk about freedom-loving Americans and fair-minded Americans. There are a lot more of us than there are among the elite institutions, and the thing they're doing, Matt, look at colleges. They're wrecking the institutions.
They are.
I mean, you could easily see, 80% fewer colleges in the next decade because parents and other people refuse to pay the money to pay for that nonsense. So what's that mean? That means it's going to create an opportunity for a jobs business. I've been in the education business. You could start training people for the jobs that are available, and there are plenty of them if you get the proper education. Any of the big institutions that, for that matter, we might end up with private police forces because defund the police will open opportunity for security businesses. So as an entrepreneur, you can find lots of holes, and this is not a monolith that we're facing, particularly if we hang together. And companies like Patriot Mobile, who is a Christian-oriented mobile company, and they're finding a great niche among people who want to do business with them. And so I think there are lots of opportunities, and you sort of got to turn your attention away from all the nonsense and start asking yourself, what is it that people really want? What would they pay for? And when you start asking questions like that, you can end up with a pretty good business.
So I've been predicting that Donald Trump would win shortly after 2020. You and I talked a lot about this. I think we came to the same conclusion that he had to win, number one, for America to survive. But then there was this question of when does it look like it's possible he's going to win? And now with all these polls, you have the New York Times poll that came out today that has him up substantially in all but one battleground state where he still has a lead, but it's very small. It's easy now to predict that Donald Trump is going to win. It was hard to predict a year or 2 or 3 years ago. But I've always said that that's a short-term solution, right? 4 years, how quickly is he a lame duck? Is it like 2.5 years of power? We can all have how many angels can dance on the head of that pin, but that 4 years is a short term. Do you think maybe the medium-term strategy on saving America is all these millions of people that have reversed, done U-turns? They didn't join the faculty at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, or they didn't join the woke legal team at General Motors or whatever, and they turned around, they figured out their own way because, as you said, there's still a lot of opportunity in America. They might be working for Patriot Mobile, or they might be working for Eric Prince's new firm Unplugged, or they might be working for some new company being run by true freedom lovers. Is that the next medium course where America could
Yes.
see
Yeah, I
some
do think
real?
so. And also all the bad stuff that Biden administration is doing, you can reverse that pretty
Yeah,
quickly, I believe. And you take Janet Yellen, she's made Treasury, she's made climate change and DEI her number one agenda item. Well, you just turn that around and you say, well, maybe economic growth and helping Congress put together a more balanced budget, strong dollar, things like that. We can get this turned around. And not Biden, when Trump picks a competent vice president to be the president in waiting, I think we might have 12 years to fix this instead of just 4. And if I had to put money, that's what I would bet on. The thing we've got to do, and you understand politics much, much better than I do, is we have the voters. I think we got a big percentage. 55% of the voters, 60% maybe, but we haven't had the ballots.
that's right.
So we got to make sure this is a free and fair election. I mean, you know the numbers better than me, but we had some unbelievable number of new ballots cast in 2020. I don't know whether that
Well,
many people actually voted.
I keep thinking we need to have Kevin Hassett, our fellow board member at CPAC, in this conversation because he's like you. He loves to study statistics and look behind the numbers, and seeing the number of people that hadn't voted in the last 4 elections all of a sudden decide that they were going to get really involved in vote at a very old age. That makes me scratch my head and wonder what the hell that's all about. But I like 2 numbers when you think about the election. Not a numbers guy, so I like to keep it very simple. 44 and 88, right? Donald Trump lost the presidency by 44,000 votes approximately, and he won the presidency by 88,000 votes time before. Very small amounts, very small number of votes in the right places. And so you look at this, and then I have a third number, 81 million. So Joe Biden gets 81 million in the depths of this most insane moment of Chinese corona and shutdowns, and you're going to kill your neighbor if you go vote next to him and all that insanity. So I don't think there's any way possible that he will get the ballots returned. So I like how you say that. It's not really votes. It's more printed ballots that people returned for other people, which became legal in certain places and was overlooked. The illegality was overlooked in other places. So if you get 81 million, which is a high water mark, I don't think you can get there again. You have this small amount of votes, 44,000. Is it doable? It's completely doable. Are people more aware that there's a lot of fraud and they're going to police it better? I think so. I think there's no question that will have a very big marginal impact, the fact that people get this. And I said something today on Twitter, which I think is right, Bill, which I'll try it out on you, which is, it's strange. The states that were the closest last time that showed the biggest delta of improvement for Trump, where now he has double-digit leads, are those states where they're having all these legal disputes. Georgia, where they went out and indicted about a dozen people over claiming that there was fraud in the election. And I think the more the people of Georgia have listened to this trial, and listened to all the legal challenges, I think we're winning the argument. And I think that's also true in Nevada, which Trump has a double-digit lead in now, if you believe these polls. And I do. It's the New York Times. I bet they're even stronger for Trump than it's coming across. So when people really look under the trunk or under the hood and see what the arguments are on fraud, they come to the same conclusion you did, Bill, which is, why should someone be voting for somebody else, and why should someone get a ballot they never asked for?
Well, and I think you're right about the local people know the prosecutors and what's going on there. They're closest to this egregious lawfare, and it's over the top. I mean, you can go from case to case to case and show why it shouldn't even be going on. And people see that, and even people who might not have liked Trump Americans don't like people getting a raw deal. And each day in and day out, with each new twist and turn from one of these judges, that becomes more and more apparent. And I think it's completely failed them, the Democrats, as a strategy. I don't know what their plan B is. Today I read that they were going to encourage Kamala to retire for health reasons. They're going to name Hillary vice president, and then Joe's going to retire. So we'll end up with Hillary. But this is the kind of Hail Mary that the Democrats are thinking about now, because they don't know what to do.
Hey, Bill, I'm totally offended that you brought up a Hail Mary and Hillary Clinton in the same sentence. I just think that's wrong.
Well, I forget. I'm a Presbyterian. I didn't.
But as we, the last question here, I think, is important, which is the one thing I see on social media, specifically on X, which I look at kind of all day long, is these mostly Jewish, but not completely, big donors to these big institutes, these big universities that have all this pro-Hamas garbage going on campus. And CPAC really calls out all that garbage. It's really disgusting to see professors and students be so radicalized. They're against Lockheed Martin, for heaven's sake. I mean, how insane is that? But I look at this like Bill Ackman and these other people that are out there very aggressively on X. They seem to be Democrats. They seem to be kind of center-left or left in their political orientation, but they're all sounding very MAGA. I've never seen anything like this, where you have so many people in the finance world just saying, enough's enough. We can't keep doing this. Are you seeing a similar trend, and do you think that'll have a big impact?
I am. I think, these were mainly Democrats, and they sort of like the Democrat Party, made them feel good because they were backing all these causes. Well, that line has been pushed way to the left, and if you're a sober-minded hedge fund manager or money manager or somebody who's running a multinational company, and you're looking at what's happening to the culture, to the people who you can hire, to just the kind of regulations that's coming out of the EPA and the Labor Department, you've got to be saying, wait a second, this is not what we paid for. This is not, and I might say they did pay for it with their donor money. And I think we're going to see some of that reversing and going reluctantly towards Trump, but nevertheless, that's the only place they can land right now and end up with something that resembles a sane government.
Well, Bill, I want to do this again. I'm going to make one final statement, which is I think if you look at the polls, the main driver on the polls is the fact that Donald Trump has a 20, 30-point lead on handling the economy in America. That's still always the most important thing. You agree with that?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I won't even say he's got his weak. I'll just say he's got strength after strength after strength, and that's what we need right now. And the things he's good at are the things we need most desperately.
Yeah, for sure. So we got to continue this conversation because I want to get into this. What's going to happen between here and November in the markets? What's going to happen with some of these major indicators people look at? And how does the swamp cook the book so effectively? So we'll leave that as tantalizing questions for our next conversation. We might even include Kevin and Mercy in the conversation. But I agree with what you're saying, and I thank God people are waking up from their stupor. And thanks, Bill. Tell folks you're doing a lot of work on CPAC now. Tell us what you're going to be focusing on throughout the rest of the year.
Well, we've been focusing on the World Health Organization's power grab, and that's something that may have stopped itself for now because it was so egregious. This was their attempt to turn a voluntary arrangement into a mandatory arrangement, and looks like right now that next couple of weeks they're not going to be able to get it together to pass something. That doesn't mean they're not going to be coming back, and so we've got to be very, very mindful. And the nice thing about CPAC is we're not just in America; we're all over the world in the freedom movement, and so we're now encouraging countries to stare more closely at this, and they're beginning to, and I think we'll get some real pushback. So, CPAC's making a difference in ways people I don't think even imagine. We've come a long way from just a bunch of politicians giving speeches.
Yeah, matter of fact, I think I'm tired of politicians giving speeches. I want to hear from people that are really doing things, with the rare exception, of course. Bill Walton, thanks for all the great work you do. Best to Sarah and to your team out there, including all the puppies who are actually dogs. They're not really puppies.
I'll see you back out here in this seat, not too maybe this weekend or next. We'll see you.
It's a deal. Thanks everybody for listening to another great episode, and we'll be back at you soon.